The first thing I did after my rebirth was to go to the hospital to terminate the pregnancy. Then I filed for divorce from David. I didn't ask for custody of our son, Billy, nor any other assets. All I wanted was a seaside city apartment with an ocean view, a small 3-bedroom place. I made it cozy and filled it with things like parent-child matching sets. At first, Billy thought everything was for him, so he wasn't interested. It wasn't until he found out the pink children's room was stuffed with dolls and the wardrobe was full of pretty princess dresses that he got scared. Both Billy and David thought I was sick, or losing it. Billy asked me, "Mom, I'm your real son. Why don't you even look at me, but treat your imaginary daughter so well?" What he didn't know was that she wasn't imaginary. I actually had a beautiful, sweet daughter. She lives in my past life's memories. 6 months after settling in the seaside town, David called me, asking why. Our divorce process was really straightforward, as simple as having a meal together. We both just assumed Billy would stay with family, and didn't really fuss over custody. He never questioned my sudden desire for a divorce, just going through the paperwork with indifference. I figured he didn't care. Just like how he never cared about my feelings all those years we were married. Now, 6 months later, he suddenly asks, why? At that moment, I was hanging a portrait in the freshly painted pink room. In the portrait, a woman held a little girl by the window, with a blue sea and windmills outside. The golden sunlight fell on the girl's face, masking her sickly pallor. I stared into the little girl's face in the painting. Why? I wanted to say, because we were supposed to have a daughter. Her name was Lily. She was beautiful, sweet, but unfortunately not healthy. 70% of congenital heart defects can be detected during prenatal exams, but she was in that unlucky 30%. You had fatherly love for her momentarily, but quickly lost patience when she was in and out of hospitals and surgeries. You started staying out, using the tense home situation as an excuse. While I exhausted myself taking care of her, while I prayed outside the ICU that death wouldn't take her, while I signed the papers to stop treatment and watched them unplug her oxygen, you were out with your lover, openly taking Billy with you, happily calling another woman mom. But in the end, I said nothing, just asked David, "Did you have breakfast with Kathy today?" A year after settling in the seaside town, I saw Billy. I had just returned from a trip to Xinjiang, carrying a canvas bag, looking dusty and worn out, when I saw those 2 figures standing outside my building. I instinctively paused, maintaining my distance. As time passed, I had stopped thinking much about them. They never liked me, and my feelings for them had faded through the long disappointments of my past life. I thought as long as I didn't seek them out, we'd never meet again. Billy spoke first. Even though he was only 6, his IQ was high. His words, innocent yet hurtful. "The school organized a parent-child trip, and Grandma and Grandpa said since I'm here, I should at least see you. It's polite, you know." I nodded silently. Billy and David looked so alike. Not just their refined features, but that same cold look when they looked at me. In my last life, they looked at me like that when I broke down at Lily's funeral, or on that rooftop 36 floors up. David said, "Laura, don't make a scene." Billy said it too, "Mom, don't make a scene." After the divorce, Billy called me a month later. Somehow he heard about my move to the seaside town, and called to mockingly tell me, "They said you moved here and redesigned a kid's room, even changed everything to parent-child sets. But I'm not going to live with you. Don't waste your effort." I calmly said, and heard him cheer from the other end. "Wow, Kathy got me a new game console. Kathy's the best." Then he hung up abruptly. Apparently, my leaving didn't affect his life a bit. He preferred his games and those who played with him. But now, his cold demeanor suddenly cracked. His eyes, just like David's, filled with tears, and he stubbornly glared at me, like it hurt to. This time, it was my turn to look coldly at him. He couldn't hold it, turned to run before his tears fell, but stumbled and landed on the ground. He just lay there for a moment, then looked back at me. He always did that. Act indifferent when I was close, but once my attention shifted, he'd pretend to fall or get sick, making me soften, at a loss. But this time, I stared at him, unmoved. He widened his eyes, incredulous, his expression a mix of confusion, misunderstanding, and sadness, then burst out crying. "You're a liar, a big liar. You said you'd love me forever, be with me forever." David frowned, chastising me. "Laura, he's just a kid. He understands more than you think. You shouldn't be so cold to him." His expression was grave, his tone still high and mighty. This was how it always was between us. More employer and employee than husband and wife. He rarely initiated conversations at home, always me reporting life's details to him. He was indifferent about me, only speaking up about Billy, even scolding me in front of Billy and the help, without any regard. So every time he showed displeasure, I'd subconsciously reflect, self-examine, think over where I was wrong or needed improvement. And now, seeing that stern face again, it only filled me with disgust. Did you forget what you told me when we divorced? He said he hoped I wouldn't disrupt Billy's life, that Billy was young and would soon get used to me not being there, that it was for the best. That was the longest thing he ever said to me during the divorce. Now he assumes. I thought wrong. Billy is your only child. He needs you, and you. I cut him off, but I don't need him. David was stunned. Both he and Billy had never seen me like this. David still doesn't seem to get just how determined I was when I left a year ago. It's like he'll never understand that Billy isn't my only child. I once had a daughter, even if I'm the only one who knows about her. On the day I started over, I dreamed of Lily crying and calling me a liar. She said, "Mom, you promised you'd live well after I was gone." Her crying tugged at my heart. I promised her that this time, I would keep my word. But between my promises to her and to Billy, I could only fulfill one. I loved Billy as much as I loved Lily. He was the child I brought into this world despite all the hardships, my flesh and blood. I was thrilled when he arrived. Just one sweet smile from him, even before he could talk, made me forget all the difficulties of being his wife. Back then, I was willing to give him everything, even my life, just for him to grow up happy and healthy. David doesn't love me. Our story is pretty ordinary. Childhood friends with no suitable partners. As we grew up, we got together because our families pushed us to. I once felt uneasy about this kind of ordinary love. As a student, I saw what David was like when he truly loved someone. Young David was so much more lively and cheerful. He was always smiling, carefree even when scolded, triumphant when winning a basketball game, and absolutely joyous when seeing a girl he loved. His smiling eyes, crescent-shaped like the winter sun, could steal anyone's heart. He was passionate and madly in love. That girl was a top student, winning awards in physics competitions and eventually skipping grades to study abroad. After she left, David seemed indifferent to everything. Before our wedding, I asked David if we would truly be happy. He said we would. Love made me ignore the indifference in his voice. I comforted myself, thinking that people grow, become steady, and learn to love in a mature way. Then Kathy, a young and pretty game designer, entered his life. That's when I realized David only knows one way to love. He started smiling while texting, noticing lipstick shades he never cared about before, learning about women's perfume, and staying up late to test new games with her. When I, worried sick, found him at work one morning after he hadn't come home, he was having breakfast with another woman. He was gently peeling an egg for her, something he never did for me. Back then, I thought it didn't matter that David didn't love me. At least one person in this family did. At least Billy did. I didn't know then that Billy wasn't as loving as I thought, that he would end up breaking my heart over and over again. After that rough day, I figured with both David and Billy's tempers, they wouldn't come back. But to my surprise, the next day Billy showed up downstairs with a little backpack, alone this time. The property management called while I was painting. I was painting a memory, Lily as a little girl running freely on the beautiful grasslands of Yeely, wearing a princess dress. I don't have any photos or videos of Lily, afraid I might forget her face as time goes by. I draw her over and over again, from a baby to the last moment of her 5-year life. I've painted so many that they fill every corner of my home. But later, I got to thinking, my Lily shouldn't only be on a sickbed. So, I started traveling to take pictures of beautiful places and paint her into them. This painting was slow going, because I injured my right shoulder horseback riding in Xinjiang. Lifting my arm was still a bit difficult, so it took over a month to finish. It was my first time horseback riding. When I picked the white horse, a young man from the riding team hesitated, warning that the horse was temperamental, and had thrown off riders before. I smiled and said it was okay, because the white horse was gorgeous. Midway through, the horse acted up, suddenly kneeling, throwing me onto the grass. Everyone in the group was shocked. A little girl helped her mom brush the grass off my face, and sweetly asked, "Are you hurt?" Later, I took many pictures of her and her mom. She reminded me of Lily. But truth be told, the furthest place Lily ever went was this seaside town. She was healthier then, so I planned for the whole family to vacation here. David said he was busy, and Billy wanted to test a new game for David's company. So it was just Lily and me. Those days were so peaceful and beautiful. During the day, I taught her to paint inside, and in the mornings and evenings, we collected shells on the beach. She said when she got better, she'd live in this place forever. So, when we divorced, I only asked for this seaside home. It's a place just for Lily and me, with nothing to do with Billy or David. I didn't want Billy to set foot in this house, so I gave the property management David's and his parents' contacts right away. A few minutes later, they called back, saying Billy ran into the community and disappeared after they tried to reach David. Billy was still the child I had raised with so much care. I couldn't just let anything bad happen to him. I sighed, put down my paints, and went downstairs to look for him. I looked all over, getting drenched in sweat, only to find him smugly waiting at my door. His face said, "I knew you wouldn't leave me." I didn't say much. As I unlocked the door, he darted inside like a proud little lion, confidently inspecting his territory. He asked, "Which one's my room? You got me a video game console, right? I want to go play." I didn't answer, and told him to wait in the living room for David. Then I went back to finish my painting, but shortly after, I heard a loud crash from the children's room. I rushed over and saw a painting that had hung by the bed smashed on the floor. Its frame shattered, sent oil dripping down Lily's face in the picture, ruining it. Billy stood on the bed, unsure, and said, I don't like this painting. Why did you hang someone else's picture in my room? Why are you holding her in the picture?" I knew he probably just wanted to take the painting down, not break it, and I understood he was just a kid, clueless about the context. But I couldn't keep my voice from getting a bit stern. "I told you to wait in the living room for your dad. Stop messing with things." Noticing my restrained emotion, Billy's expression turned a little vulnerable. "When I broke things before, you'd always ask if I was hurt first." I didn't answer, just stared at the sheets he dirted with his shoes, and couldn't help but frown. "Get down first." He stayed put on the bed, staring intently at me. "Mom, who's the girl you drew? Why did you draw her so many times? Why are all the paintings of her?" Billy was too young to hide the fear and confusion in his eyes. He'd seen all those paintings piling up in the house. The girl in them resembled him. "Mom, why do the security guard and the neighbors say you don't have a son, only a daughter?" I told them I'm your son, but they called me a liar. I even showed them our photos, and they still didn't believe me. "Isn't this my room?" He jumped off the bed, eager to prove something, and swung the closet open. He got stunned seeing it full of dresses. "Why so many dresses? Where are my clothes?" He rummaged through everything in the closet, finding none of his clothes. Finally, he looked at me with wide eyes, seeking an answer to calm him down. I looked at his tear-filled eyes, saying nothing. Silence stretched, and his tears fell one by one, turning into a storm of crying and pulling those princess dresses out, throwing them on the bed, swiping all the dolls from the window seat onto the floor. He desperately wanted to assert himself. "Why are someone else's dresses in my closet? I don't like dolls. Why are there so many dolls in my room? I don't like this bed and blanket. This is a girl's bed. I don't like pink. Why do you make my room this color? Why are you hugging some other girl? Why are there pictures of you with another person in my room? I don't like her. I hate her. Hate her." This time, I couldn't take it any longer. "Billy, get out. This isn't your room. There is no room here for you." When David came to pick him up, Billy, in a panic, told him, "Dad, Mom's gone crazy. She's telling people she only has a daughter." When David and Billy came back a month later, they were both cautious. David said, "Laura, you're sick." He wanted me to video call friends and family so they could tell me the daughter I painted, the one I professed to everyone I loved, didn't exist, and was just a figment of my imagination. They pulled out the family albums, trying to drag me through past memories, but our past was so sparse, just like that album, hardly filled with any family photos, mostly of Billy as he grew, mixed with a few photos of him and me. As he grew older, perhaps because of typical boyish tendencies, he leaned towards the person at home who had more authority, who could provide better conditions. He understood David's coldness towards me and soon became reluctant to take photos with me. Now, they were holding that barely filled album, recalling the details of our past, desperately trying to convince me that I never had a daughter. I laughed bitterly. "Are you calling me crazy?" David shook his head. "No, Laura, you're just sick." He pulled out a medical report, took my hand, his voice choked. "Laura, why didn't you tell me we had another child?" I looked at him silently. Regret and remorse showed on his face. "About Kathy, I can explain. It's not what you think." He said he only valued Kathy for her talent, that his attention to her was just a way to win her favor as a subordinate. His voice was softer than I ever heard. "Laura, I know you misunderstood my relationship with Kathy, which led to you impulsively terminating the pregnancy and divorcing me. Later, you regretted it, and that's why you imagined you had a daughter. Laura, it's my fault. I shouldn't have blurred the boundaries, letting you misunderstand and get hurt, causing your illness to worsen. In all those 12 years as a married couple in my past life, I had never seen David speak to me with such humility. I stared at him, amazed, as if seeing him for the first time. You see, in the past life, when I suspected something was off between him and Kathy, Every one of my confrontations and attempts ended with him coldly saying, "Laura, are you sick?" Even 6 months ago, when he called questioning why, he never answered my questions. Now, believing I am truly sick, he suddenly had all the words, unexpectedly explaining his relationship with Kathy. He said, "Laura, you're sick and need treatment. Let Billy and me stay by your side. Take care of you, okay?" I told him to take Billy and leave. The second time David and Billy showed up, they brought a psychologist. It was just days after I returned from Mexico. The doctor's name was Harris. After glancing at my neck, he spoke in a friendly tone, as if we were old friends. "What happened to your neck?" I touched the thin purple mark on my neck and casually replied, "Had an accident parasailing a few days ago." That was the final leg of my Mexico trip. While parasailing, as the boat dragged me over the ocean, the tow rope snapped unexpectedly. I plunged from a height of several stories into the sea. Though wearing a life jacket, the ropes tangled around my neck and seat, keeping me underwater. I nearly drowned, losing strength in the struggle due to lack of oxygen, but luckily, the speedboat guide dove in just in time to rescue me. Looking back now, it still feels terrifying. Harris didn't press further, giving a glance at the wet paints on the easel. Lily sitting in the parasail, smiling at the blue sky and white clouds. He politely asked if he could look at my other paintings. With my consent, he examined them all meticulously and then asked about one particular piece. "Can you tell me the inspiration for this one?" It's a view from above of water, with Lily lying on her back, smiling with outstretched arms as if to welcome and embrace something. I painted it after bungee jumping at the Gandaki River in Nepal. There were many tourists that day, either nervous or excited, seeking encouragement from friends or staff. I was the only one with a calm face. A staff member jokingly said in English that I seemed more like someone here for suicide rather than fun, admitting he didn't dare to push me. Though saying that, he wasn't gentle when he let me go. The wind pressed against my face as I plummeted, my eyeballs. That fleeting weightlessness took me back to the last moment from the 37th floor of my past life. Honestly, back then, everything felt blurry, like it all ended in the blink of an eye. But this time, the sense of falling freely was so crystal clear. When I got close to the water, I started seeing things. I saw Lily's figure flickering beneath the surface, smiling and reaching out to hug me, only to shatter into the sparkling waves of the Gandaki River, as I tried to hold her tight. I didn't answer Harris's questions. Harris was patient, gently probing, trying to understand the logic behind my actions. "Laura, when you terminated the pregnancy, it was just an embryo without gender characteristics. Why do you think it was a girl? Could it be because you're projecting yourself?" I laughed. "Are you saying I'm narcissistic?" "No." Harris shook his head. "You're feeling compassion for yourself. Is it possible that you directed the resentment you have toward your husband onto the child? But after the abortion, you felt remorse. So you imagined a little girl based on yourself. Similarly, it's not that you don't love Billy anymore, you love him too much. Yet, you resent him and channel all your love for him into this imagined girl. But this little girl, she's dangerous for you." He sighed softly. "Skydiving, paragliding, bungee jumping. Laura, haven't you noticed you're chasing high-risk thrills? This imagined girl is leading you to flirt with death. And if you don't open up and accept treatment, the consequences could be severe." "Laura, I want to help you." David chimed in. "Laura, accept the help. Let us take care of you, okay?" Billy came forward too, trying to take my hand, with a manner unusually gentle. "I knew you couldn't have stopped loving me, Mom. It's because you're not well. Let us help you." "Mom, would you draw something for me? You never painted for me." I cut him off. "I have painted for you. On your birthday last year, I gave you a portrait as a gift. Growing up, my grades were just average. Not like the academic stars David liked, but I had a knack for art, and got into the best art school here. Sadly, my parents thought painting wouldn't pay the bills. They hoped I'd marry soon after graduation, so they wouldn't worry about me and could join my brother in New Zealand without concern. I compromised because the person they picked for me was David. I thought I could still paint even if I got married. But soon, I was pregnant with Billy, and household chores and raising him took up most of my time. Every time I tried to focus and paint, Billy would start crying, and I'd have to put down my brush to comfort him, gradually abandoning painting altogether. Until Billy's 5th birthday, on a whim, I picked up my long unused brushes and painted a portrait for him. But he clearly preferred the game console Kathy got him and tossed it aside. Later, I found that painting folded under his desk, used to prop up a wobbly leg. Billy stammered, I didn't mean to. I must have grabbed the wrong thing." I smiled and pointed it out. "No, you did it on purpose. That day, you wouldn't take a bath, so I took your game away. You did this to get back at me. You've always done this. If you don't get your way, you retaliate by ruining the gifts I give. trashing my kindness to hurt me. Because you know I love you, you know I care. You want me to be upset. Billy paled, but couldn't find the words. I looked at David, and honestly, I'd seen his efforts to reconcile long ago. Like how there never was a parent-child trip organized at Billy's school in our previous life. Or how, despite having so many bodyguards and nannies, they'd never let Billy wander off alone without concern. Or how, even now, neither in this life nor the past, he'd stopped wearing clothes I bought him. At some point, without ever being particular about clothes, he started buying his own. Later, I found out Kathy was buying them for him. To please Kathy, he stopped wearing anything I bought, even switched to her preferred leather-scented cologne. Yet, whenever he visited me, he'd intentionally wear what I picked out, wearing my favorite woody fragrance. I just didn't care. I didn't care why, after a year, he suddenly wanted to make amends, or why, after I made room, he didn't just bring Kathy in. Because I didn't care, I left it unsaid. But high and mighty as ever, even when reconciling, he couldn't put aside his pride, only trying to soften me up by using Billy. Now he thinks I'm sick, as if suddenly that gives him a reason to back down. His demeanor does a complete 180. He becomes gentle and accommodating, acting as if because I'm supposedly ill, now I'm fragile, needing his protection. Every action now cloaked in a noble facade, it's for your own good. He was so sincere in his act, I almost believed him. David, you say there's nothing with Kathy. Then why spend lavishly on jade, carve a Buddha, and kneel every step up the temple stairs for her well-being? Even when Lily was gravely ill, you never did anything like that for her. And why, under the guise of working late, spend Valentines with her, hugging and kissing her? David's face turned sour. I smiled, wondering how I know all this so well. Your son told me. I first heard of Kathy from Billy. One day, he kept talking about how good Kathy was, how she was with Dad. Why couldn't I be more like her? At first, maybe Billy didn't mean it that way, but later, he certainly did it on purpose. I've said Billy's smart. After seeing how I felt every time he mentioned Kathy, if something displeased him, he'd bring her up. I know he likes Kathy and games, but might not really want her as his mom. He just enjoyed hurting me by revealing his dad's closeness to another woman as punishment. Especially after I had Lily, it only got worse. While I was pregnant, he'd casually say, "Mom, you're so fat and ugly, not like Kathy, who's slim and pretty." And when I was nursing, he'd mention, "Mom, your belly's saggy, your clothes are ratty, covered in milk stains, you smell gross, no wonder Dad sleeps apart." When I was in the hospital with Lily for her surgery, he would occasionally tell me about the things David did for Kathy. Today, David would gift Kathy something, and tomorrow, they did some activities together. He would excitedly tell me about how amazing Kathy is, boasting that she designed a new game and now has a new game to play, unlike me, who he saw as useless. After coming back from business trips with David, he'd tell me about all the places they went out with Kathy, as if they were a family of 3. He would proudly show me photos of the 3 of them, and ask me how my photography skills were. He thought he hid his feelings well, but every time he mentioned these things, I could see the malice in his eyes. It was the first time I experienced the innocent cruelty of a child from my own son. He was like a little devil, whispering madness-inducing spells in my ear every day. I knew many nosy relatives and friends would provoke him, saying I would only love Lily and not him anymore with a second child. I asked myself if I had been biased towards Lily over him, causing his erratic behavior. But upon reflection, I was sure I wasn't. Even if I spent a lot of time shuttling between the hospital and home for Lily, I would still care for Billy, ask the nanny if he'd eaten, and check his homework. Unless Lily was having surgery, I would always attend Billy's parent-teacher conferences, even if I hadn't slept for 48 hours at the hospital. Before Lily was born, he didn't like me around. He thought I was annoying and idle, preferring to shut himself in his room to play games. But once my attention shifted from him to his sister, he became unhappy. He didn't want it, but didn't want me giving it to others either. I don't know where this selfish streak in his character came from, until I was reborn and decided to leave David without hesitation. When David came crawling back, I realized he was like his father, a man who, while I was exhausted with Lily's condition and hurt by Billy's intentional jabs, was busy cheating and contemplating divorce. I wanted a divorce too. I wasn't a masochist or hopeless romantic, unable to live without David. But for Lily, I couldn't. Her medical expenses were beyond what ordinary income could cover. Yet I couldn't leave Lily with David, who would rather spend time with Kathy than see Lily at the hospital. And Lily's heart disease might not withstand the shock of a broken family. So I had to grit my teeth and endure. I often wondered why David could love Billy but not Lily. Lily was so beautiful, so well behaved. Even enduring pain and countless surgeries, She only cried when she couldn't bear it anymore. Even in the hospital with only a caregiver, she urged me to rest more. She missed her dad and brother and was puzzled why they never visited, but never asked or said anything about it. Such understanding, at just a few years old, was heartbreaking. After Lily's death, I found that long-prepared divorce agreement in his study, and I understood. Her existence prevented him from asking me for a divorce. A man asking for a divorce while his daughter was on the brink of death would face public outrage he couldn't afford. Unable to free himself, he resented Lily. His neglect towards her was seen by Billy, who followed his example. Even if Lily liked her brother, he wouldn't stay longer at the hospital. Even when I forced him to come, he sat playing games, barely responding to Lily. He even deliberately provoked Lily when I wasn't around. Lily died on her 5th birthday. I called David, begging him to come home so our family could celebrate Lily's birthday. I had prepared a painting for Lily's gift, the same I painted after rebirth, which Billy eventually destroyed. I held her at the window, looking at the blue sea and windmills outside, the golden sunlight masking her pale complexion. Lily loved it, kept it close, looking at it often. But when it came time for the cake, David didn't show up. I saw the disappointment in Lily's eyes. I went to the kitchen to call David, but he didn't answer. Back in the living room, I tried to find words to explain David's absence, when I overheard 11-year-old Billy contemptuously insulting the painting, saying, "It's so ugly, as pale as a ghost. Girls like you are hated at school. No wonder Dad doesn't want to be here for your birthday." Lily's face turned white. I couldn't believe my ears. Had Billy been this cruel to Lily without my knowledge? I never laid a hand on him before, but this time I couldn't control myself and slapped him. He looked at me in shock, yelled angrily, "Dad's on a date with Kathy, and won't come for this sick kid's birthday. Even if you call 100 times, he won't come. I'm never celebrating with her again. Dad will divorce you, marry Kathy. I'll be with them, not with this sick kid or you." Lily clutched her chest and collapsed. As I rushed her to the ambulance, I desperately prayed for mercy, but the doctors told me Lily couldn't endure another surgery. They advised giving up. Looking at Lily in pain, I was overwhelmed. I kept calling David, but he never answered. I later learned he was with Kathy. I signed the consent to cease treatment alone, watching them remove Lily's oxygen tube and turn off the machines. David arrived last. Even his parents, funeral home staff arrived before him. He asked why I didn't wait for him, why I made the decision myself. I wondered, wait for what? For him to come from his lover's bed to pretend to be the caring father at Lily's bedside, avoiding criticism for not being with his daughter in her final moments. For Lily to suffer a little longer for his reputation. Looking at him and then Billy standing away from the door, their expressions were equally indifferent. A father cheating as his daughter lay dying and missing her birthday. A brother who cruelly provoked his dying sister. How can they remain so calm? Why didn't they shed a single tear? Suddenly, I found them terrifying. I know all that stuff was from a past life, not anything that's happened in this one, and probably won't happen again. Maybe I shouldn't judge 6-year-old Billy for crimes he hasn't even committed in this life, but I just can't help it. I gently loosen Billy's grip, looking at Harris with a smile. "Harris, you're wrong. The little girl in the painting isn't the threat to me. It's David and Billy. If one day I go crazy or die, it'll definitely be because of those two." When David and Billy visited for the 3rd time, they were acting all tough again. I was about to leave for Iceland, just pulling my suitcase into the elevator, when David stopped me, coming out of another elevator. He threatened, "Laura, if you won't see a therapist, I'll have to commit you to a mental hospital." I chuckled at him. "With what authority? We've divorced, and you're not my guardian. We're nothing to each other, ex-husband." Billy jumped in. "Then I can, right? I'm your son." I glanced down at him. "Too bad you're underage. They couldn't do a thing to me." I turned to leave, and David tried to stop me again, but ended up breaking my necklace. It fell to the ground, and the locket flew open, revealing the little printed photo of Lily inside. David stared at the tiny picture, then lost his temper. "You chose to terminate the pregnancy, so don't regret it." With shaking hands, I clenched the locket tight, hiding any sign of weakness, and slapped him. "He gets nothing. He understands nothing. In this second life, I've had doubts, I've struggled. But in the past life, in the end," Lily lay on her hospital bed, in pain, sobbing, saying, "Mom, it hurts so much, it's unbearable. If there's a next life, can I not come to the human world?" I was really helpless. I put the broken necklace in my pocket, and didn't look back at David and Billy, dragging my suitcase into the elevator. Winter in Iceland has a stark, desolate feel. Waves crash on the black sand beaches, with dark lava stones striking against the white of the sea foam. Waterfalls, volcanoes, glacier, fjords, the small island is packed with unique landscapes and amazing sights. Being close to the Arctic Circle, winters here have very short daylight hours. The sun hovers close to the horizon, with dawn almost seamlessly blending into dusk. The sky's pink-purple belt of Venus can last for ages. I had brought a ton of pricey photography gear for this trip. Landing at Keflavik Airport, I rented a car to go Aurora hunting around the island, but it was either clear skies with the Aurora KP index below 1, or bad weather with thick clouds, so I never got a shot. On the last day of the trip, the weather forecast said there had be a snowstorm the next evening that might block the roads for days, so I had to cut my plans short. I was unwilling to leave without seeing the northern lights. Though the KP index was still just 1, the sky seemed clear, so I decided to take a chance and drive out that night. I found an open, deserted place in the wild and waited in the car until 3 a.m., but still nothing. Finally, feeling defeated, I decided to give up. But sometimes fate likes to play tricks. Just as I started the car to leave, the auroras appeared, green ribbons swirling mysteriously in the sky. I quickly grabbed my camera gear, set up at the best vantage point, and captured this gift from nature. In the biting cold, a temperature well below zero, watching the auroras outside was unbearable, so I decided to snooze in the car while the equipment snapped photos automatically. I hung the necklace David had broken on the rear view mirror. The locket's picture of Lily was smiling at me. I looked at her face and smiled back. Lily, see, I brought you to chase the auroras. I lay in the car, watching the dancing lights outside, taking a long time to doze off. When I woke, it was already late, and it was daylight. A strong wind had picked up outside, and the equipment I'd set up was quite a distance from the roadside where I'd parked. The swirling snow reduced visibility so much I couldn't see my gear from the car. I calculated the drive back to Akureyri. Considering the upcoming evening snowstorm, I decided to brave the snow and wind to gather my stuff. I didn't know then that Iceland's weather forecasts for snowstorms aren't always accurate. Early or late arrivals are common. Reaching my gear, I discovered both tripods had been knocked down, and one camera had rolled off somewhere in the wind. I scoured through the snow, now several times thicker than last night, and eventually found the damaged camera. Worried the melting snow would ruin the SD cards, I quickly pocketed them. When I headed back, everything around me was a white blur, with visibility hardly more than 5 meters. The rental car didn't have a key with a locator button, so I carried the heavy cameras and tripods, trying to find it by feeling my way. I walked a long time, way further than where the car should have been, and realized I was lost in a snowstorm that had come early. Every effort to find my way ended in exhaustion. I had to abandon the heavy cameras and tripods, but still couldn't locate the car. I took out my phone to call for help, only to find I had no signal. I was all alone, blind in the blizzard, searching aimlessly. The storm grew fiercer, icy winds biting so hard I couldn't keep my eyes open. My pace slowed as my body started to numb from the cold, losing all feeling. I knew I couldn't stop, moving only by sheer instinct. In the end, I collapsed on the snowy ground. I thought I'd die here, in a foreign country's unforgiving storm. And yet, I wasn't scared, maybe a bit relieved. In my mind, I whispered, "Sorry, Lily. Mom didn't mean to break her promise, but I just can't hold on anymore." Harris was right. I was sick. I've been testing the brink of death all along. After Lily died in my past life, I had severe depression. Or maybe it started when I found out David was cheating when Billy kept provoking me, and as I stayed by Lily's side through endless surgeries and hospital stays. The world always seemed dark, everything around filled with hostility. My husband, my son, both so cold, my daughter so pitiful. I fought hard, struggled, ended every day exhausted, yet never saw a way forward, never saw any light. But for Lily, I kept going, pretending everything was fine, hiding all the cracks at home and the ugly sides of her father and brother. When Lily passed, all those repressed negative emotions exploded at once, swallowing me like a deep abyss. I keep telling myself not to die. I promised Lily that even if she's gone, I'd live on. But I still can't stop myself from self-harming. At first, David and Billy did feel guilty. They tried to act calm, but it's not like they didn't care about Lily's death. People can be so contradictory. On one hand, you try to avoid your guilt. On the other, you can't help but feel it and want to make things right. David stopped seeing Kathy. Billy quit saying hurtful things. They pretended we were a happy family, but that did nothing for me. I remembered all too well the cold, indifferent look in their eyes by Lily's hospital bed. However much they smiled at me, however gently they spoke, they were still cold-blooded, terrible, grotesque monsters in my eyes. The most disgusting creatures in this world. The closer they got, the worse my condition became. I'd break down crying at night, lose my temper uncontrollably, and keep hurting myself. They quickly lost patience, thought I was embarrassing, a nuisance. They went back to their old ways. David stopped coming home again. Billy started throwing his icy remarks once more. The day I climbed up to the rooftop on the 37th floor, Billy shouted at me in annoyance. "It's all your fault Lily died, not anyone else's. We don't have any genetic diseases in our family. If it weren't for you, she wouldn't have been born unhealthy, wouldn't have gotten sick or died." Standing on the edge, I froze. Really, was it my fault? It must have been something I missed when I was pregnant, that left Lily with a bad heart, to suffer in this world. That thin line, that kept me from stepping towards death snapped. I jumped from the 37th floor. Depression doesn't just heal because you get another chance at life. In this new life, the negative emotions are still here. The day I went for my abortion, I even wished I'd bleed out right there on the table, and leave with Lily. But I saw her in my dreams. She was always crying, begging me not to die. I didn't want to let her down. That day, I went back home and saw David and Billy, still living as recklessly as ever. They understood nothing, knew nothing. Only I knew everything from my past life, bore all the pain, remembered their sins and despicable faces. So I ran away from the monsters, David and Billy. But it wasn't enough. Those negative feelings still lingered, as did the pain and guilt. I didn't want to break my promise to Lily, so I held on to her, fought my depression by remembering that promise. I even decorated a nursery for her, pretended she lived with me. I painted countless portraits of her, almost to madness. I traveled, saw the world for her. I tried hard to fake everything had changed, that things were getting better. I tried to convince myself the negative emotions were fading, but I still couldn't stop testing death. Every time I did some dangerous activity, I lied to myself and said it was for Lily. But really, it was for me. Now, the death I'd longed for finally came. In the blinding snowstorm, I felt calm. I slowly closed my eyes. Beep, beep, beep. Suddenly, I heard a constant car horn in the zero-visibility blizzard. That pesky sound cut through the storm, drilled into my ears, refusing to stop, aggravating me. For a long time, I fought against the dark, negative side of myself amidst the blaring horns. I really wanted to give up. I really did. But then I thought of Lily. Eventually, I opened my eyes, struggled to my feet in the snow, and picked up the tripod I had thrown away. I realized I'd just been going in circles. Using the tripod as a cane, I pushed on with my frozen limbs, crawled desperately towards the sound of the car horn. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When I finally reached the car, it turned out it wasn't far, maybe 100 meters at most. When I shakily opened the car door, how could I describe the miraculous sight before me? No matter how many times I think back on it, I felt it was Lily's spirit guiding me through the deadly snowstorm, showing me the way to survive. Cause it was impossible otherwise. The heavy tripod I'd placed on the passenger seat must have fallen towards the driver's seat, because of the storm's shaking, and somehow the necklace I hung on the rear view mirror dropped, wrapping around the tripod and pressing against the horn. The pendant with Lily on it was smiling at me amidst the blasting horn. In that moment, I was in tears. And when I got back to the car, my phone had signal again, and I called for rescue. Half an hour later, Iceland's rescue team arrived and took me to the local hospital for examination. Luckily, my frostbite wasn't too severe, and after a few days, I was able to return home. After surviving that snowstorm, my depression seemed to suddenly heal. I always knew this seaside town was beautiful, but for the year I lived here, I went about life numbly, not feeling a thing. Even though I traveled everywhere, none of the beauty registered with me. But after coming back from Iceland, everything suddenly felt different. The huge wind turbines turned lazily in the distance, the blue sea gently washed over the golden sand, and the light falling on a rusted, broken boat was so beautiful that it made you stop and stare. The world wasn't grey anymore. It gained so much color. I still live here, still paint, still travel, but no longer do dangerous things on purpose. I started dabbling in new media, sharing my portraits of Lily and travel photos online, gaining quite a bit of attention. I suddenly became a new wave artist and photographer with many fans. A year later, someone reached out to me, wanting to help showcase my work in an exhibition. I agreed. The theme of the exhibition was An Angel Was Here. It was all portraits of Lily. On opening day, surprisingly, there were a lot of people. David and Billy showed up too. Although I paid them no mind, they had been bothering me all this time. After failing to convince me to get psychological help, David changed tactics. In our marriage, neither in this life nor the last, had he ever given me flowers or surprises. And now, unbelievably, he hoped to charm me into remarriage using that. I sneered at the idea. As for Billy, he was always jealous whenever I added something for Lily at home. Once when I loved him, he seemed more into those games. But now, no matter how many games Kathy gives him, he just tells her to get lost, and David fired her too. Now he's less into games and more into wanting my motherly love. He cried to me, "Mom, I'm your real son. Why don't you even look at me? But you're so nice to this imaginary daughter of yours." Until about a week ago, they just suddenly went quiet. I thought they finally got tired and chose to give up. But now they are here at my art exhibit. Seeing me all suspicious, David gives a bitter smile. "No need to worry, we're not here to cause trouble." He stares at the nearest painting, Lily in the blizzard, smiling like an angel. David's eyes get a bit watery. "Laura, I've been having the same dream over and over, dreaming that we have a daughter, and her name's Lily." Billy, with his tear-streaked eyes, asks me, "Mom, I dream it too, is it true?" I looked coldly at father and son, not saying a word. That day, David and Billy, with their eyes red, carefully looked at every painting in the exhibit. The last painting took up the whole wall. Under Iceland's dazzling auroras, Lily's white wings take her to the sky. She was my angel, and she was here once. David and Billy stood in front of it for a long time, and never showed up in my life again. Epilogue. When Billy was 11, Laura remarried and soon had a daughter named Betty. On the day Betty was born, Billy climbed to the 37th floor rooftop, demanding to see Laura. David, a bit impatient, looked at him and said, "Billy, stop acting up." At that moment both father and son froze. They both remembered the dream, remembered the past life. Laura was teetering on the 37th floor edge, and they had said the same. "Stop acting up." The blood scattered after Laura's fall and the pallor at Lily's death had been David's nightmare for years. Laura was right about him. He was just being foolish. He always thought Laura was too dull, too quiet, too much like a backdrop. Her life repeating the same things in the house, wearing similar clothes. Only after their divorce, when Laura left without looking back, did he realize his feelings for her. She was like a quiet rain seeping through his life, and suddenly pulling away left a huge void inside him that couldn't be filled. He would naturally call her name when something went missing. Turning around, he would mistakenly feel like she'd be waiting right behind him. One late night, when reaching out to hold thin air beside him, longing for her overwhelmed him like an unstoppable virus taking over every sense. He had to get her back, but at the time, he didn't really understand anything. He thought he hid what happened with Kathy well enough, and that he could pretend nothing happened. Laura loved him so much that if he just lowered himself a bit, she'd surely take him back without hesitation. He didn't know Billy had secretly told Laura everything, nor did he know what he'd done in his past life. He couldn't understand why Laura's eyes were icy and mocking, making him feel like dirt. Until he had that dream. In the dream, after Laura died in his past life, he also suddenly repented, realizing his feelings for her. Guilt, heartache, longing, his intense feelings almost drove him insane. He knew he had to do something. He had to do something. So, he took revenge on Kathy, fired her from the company, left her with nowhere to go, deeply in debt, even forced her to sell herself. Eventually, she got a disease and came for him, knife in hand. As she drove it into his heart, she screamed, "Did I make you cheat? Did I make you sleep with me? It's you. It's all your fault you can't control yourself. Why blame me for everything?" Yeah, he's just that terrible, blaming others, avoiding the truth. Like he knew Lily might be born with congenital heart disease, possibly because Laura found out about his affair during pregnancy, got upset, and that affected Lily. But he didn't want to admit it. So he ignored Laura's pain, ignored Lily's suffering, numbing himself with an affair. Even the day Lily died, he wouldn't admit fault. He blamed Kathy for keeping him with her body, for setting his phone to silent, so he'd miss Laura's call and Lily's last birthday. He blamed Laura for signing the consent to stop treatment, ending Lily's life early, making him miss seeing her one last time. All her fault, no fault of his. He twisted the truth to himself. So, Laura was right. He was a monstrous, horrid person with no remorse. He deserved not being able to win her back. He didn't deserve her love. He didn't dare to see her again. He didn't really want to give up on Laura. Truth is, he still wanted to stick around, but he feared her cold gaze, reflecting all his darkness, leaving nothing hidden. So for years, he kept both himself and Billy from disturbing Laura. He blamed Billy too, blamed him for pushing Lily to the edge in the past life, for pushing Laura to her death, even though he never guided Billy nor stopped his bad behavior back then. But he could deceive himself into thinking he wasn't at fault. It was all Billy, the 11-year-old's fault. In the past life, after Laura died, Billy suffered severe depression. Laura's words about Billy having his father's bad nature were spot on. Just like after Laura's death, he understood regret. Billy realized, after Laura was gone, how much he loved the mother he had tormented emotionally. Billy started acting like Laura did before, breaking down in tears without reason, throwing fits over nothing, and self-harming when no one watched. And David watched it all coldly, uninterested in helping. He didn't know what happened to Billy after he died in the past life. But after sharing the past life dream with David in this life, Billy developed the same severe depression. He'd often cry out for Laura, clutching his heart, asking David, "Dad, my heart hurts so bad. Do I have the same heart disease as Lily? If I'm sick too, will Mom and Lily forgive me?" But every hospital visit showed he was physically fine. When he got older and understood psychosomatic symptoms, he stopped asking David. Yet he still wanted to see Laura, only able to peek into her life through the internet, through others since David was watching him. When Billy found out Laura had a new boyfriend, he began provoking David, much like he used to provoke Laura. He'd tell David purposely, Laura went there with him, Laura got gifts from him, Laura kissed him, Laura accepted his proposal. Laura is getting married. He'd relentlessly repeat how happy Laura was without them. He punished himself, tortured David. David felt like his heart was being ripped apart repeatedly, and finally, he understood how Laura felt when dealing with Billy. He finally understood why Laura was so determined not to have this son. He realized that, like him, Billy was a hideous demon. The day he found out Laura was getting married, David nearly went crazy. He wanted to rush to her and ask, "How can you get married? How can you love someone else? Have you forgotten about Lily?" But he restrained himself. Even without an invitation, he sent a nice gift. When he heard she was pregnant and had a daughter, David was hurt, but he wasn't as emotional anymore. Billy, on the other hand, made a big fuss. But on that day on the 37th floor rooftop, after they both froze when David blurted out, "Stop the nonsense," Billy walked down from the rooftop by himself and never mentioned wanting to see Laura again. Together they looked through Laura's social media feed. A fan asked why she named her daughter Betty instead of Lily after drawing so many lilies. She replied, "Lily is Lily, Betty is Betty." Others might not get it, but David and Billy understood. Betty wasn't a replacement for Lily, nor was she there to fill Lily's void. Laura was a good mother and never favored one child over another. Later, David invested half of his wealth in charitable causes and established a foundation for pediatric heart disease. As Billy grew older, he frequently recalled the dream of his past life, where he was his awful self. Although he liked video games and designing them with Kathy, he never wanted Kathy to be his mom. At first, Billy just wanted to rebel against Laura's rules, and later, he hated how most of Laura's attention was on Lily. He feared that Laura would stop loving him in favor of his sister, as people said. As an 11-year-old, he might have known that provoking Laura and Lily was wrong, but he didn't really want them to die. Yet harmful words became a habit and just slipped out, so he grew silent. After getting into college, Billy didn't choose finance. Instead, he studied medicine, focusing on pediatric cardiology, and volunteering at children's hospitals during vacations. Both he and David were trying to atone in their own ways. Years later, Billy finally became a competent pediatric heart surgeon. He practically lived at the hospital, either treating or operating on patients, pushing himself to the limit. It was like only by curing more kids could he cleanse the guilt within him. He met a 5-year-old girl who was pretty and well-behaved, suffering from the same congenital heart defect as Lily. Billy was her surgeon. The surgery day was her birthday. The operation went on for 20 hours and was a success. Billy stepped out of the surgery room with a smile, utterly exhausted, and then collapsed. His heart stopped, and he left this world smiling.